Take it away, Sarah.
Hi. It's almost like I suddenly feel shy. For the listener, Steph and I haven't seen each other probably for about a month.
Yeah,
So, I
we're
don't
getting
know.
acquainted.
Yeah, we're getting reacquainted. We're just warming up to each other again.
Well, this topic intrigued you. And I
It
think
did.
there was a question when we were looking at, okay, what do we want to, how do we want to conceptualize the episode that you said, let's lead with this. So I'm just curious about like, ooh, why? What do you want to say? What's going on in your head about it?
Well, when we were looking at the questions, because at the beginning, when Steph and I do the intro to the podcast, we look up some questions about the topic. And just the question about, I think it came up as, is oversharing always about attention seeking? And I had a bit of a reaction because it's never occurred to me that oversharing, and we'll obviously have to define what we think oversharing is, but that oversharing is about, or would be about attention seeking. Maybe because I don't even agree with the term attention seeking. Maybe that's where it's
Mm.
jarring. And maybe because I might think of myself as a bit of an oversharer as well. So I bristle at
Yeah.
being called an attention seeker.
Well, it could also be because there's different flavors of oversharing. I have a client who resonates with the fact that it's attention, like she calls it attention seeking. She said she feels like it is based on the need for attention that she acknowledges. But I don't think it always has to be. So maybe there's a part of you that's like, that's not the flavor of my oversharing. But what are we defining as oversharing? What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah. Who gets to decide what it
Yeah.
is?
Well, if
We
we
should.
were,
Yeah, what if we got to decide?
yeah.
Or what if we asked ChatGPT? And
Okay.
then, because isn't it easier to critique somebody else's
Ideas.
ideas than it is to come up with your own?
Yes. I think that's a mirroring concept.
Okay, just ChatGPT says oversharing is when someone discloses personal information, thoughts, feelings, experiences, or details in a way that feels disproportionate, poorly timed, or out of sync with the context or relationship. It often involves bypassing emotional boundaries, either one's own or others. It's
Uh-huh.
not just about how much you share, but why, when, and with whom.
And again, largely subjective, even the definition therein, like who decides what is beyond the boundary, or
Yeah.
more than a person can hold. How do you see it?
Well, I see myself as someone who's very comfortable with sharing their life. And you must have a reasonable level of comfort with that as well to do the podcast. And
Yeah.
we talk about things that are vulnerable and sometimes difficult for us to talk about. And Steph and I have to listen back to ourselves in the edit. And of course, there are moments when we might be cringing and going, oh, do I want to put that out? Do I not? And when I know people who are going through things that they keep very private, I feel a little bit confused sometimes. And I'm
Mm.
talking about more people in my personal life who perhaps we wouldn't unpick it than if I was sitting with a client. So I have a friend that I have a couple of people actually that there are, let's say there's addiction in the family and it's so shrouded in shame. So even within the friendship group, it's like, okay, this is happening again, but don't tell anybody. And I guess for me, how I would see something like that, I don't see that as a shame thing. I see
Yeah.
someone suffering.
Hmm.
I think that might even be something as well with when you've been exposed to diversity in life compared to when you've lived a more closeted life. Maybe that makes you a bit more tolerant of difference and different struggles. I don't know. I find it confusing when people are very private
I
about
know.
things. It just
I do
confuses
too. I
me.
always
I'm
feel
like,
so blocked out.
yeah.
Like, no, 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 I'm not going to judge you. Please tell me.
Hmm.
I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
I've had to come to see it as like really working hard on respecting the value that they're protecting, because I do think a lot of it is probably shame, but also probably the way that that was internalized or maybe the way they were brought up. Like my mother is somebody who keeps things close to the vest. It wouldn't occur to her to share because it's just not in her habit. Like it's not what she would do. And I think as a kid, I was like, it felt like it was a rejection. Like it was like, not that she needed to be telling me the ins and outs of her life, but I just felt like I couldn't get in. And whenever I'm with somebody that I feel like if we're going to keep it on the surface, I'm like, well, what are we doing here then? Like, I want to know you, and and I feel so comfortable sharing. And to me, it's connecting in certain ways. And I do want to explain how I've shifted on that. But like, it's a point of connection as far as I'm concerned. And if shame's in the way of it, I think shame blocks connection. So
Hmm.
I think I've perceived that, and I'm working on, I think through coaching too, is understanding why that's protective to somebody and why somebody's instinct would be to protect before connect, right? Whereas I look at connection as like the antidote to all of that. Like why wouldn't you want to connect? That's going to help.
Yeah.
I'm an external processor. This is going to help. Like
Yes.
it's how could you not? That's really where I come from. Is like how do you not talk
Mm.
about these things? But some people's instinct isn't that. So I'm realizing more and more as I get older, not everybody's like me.
No way.
Yeah, I know, shocker. It took me only this long.
I've definitely heard it come up a couple of times where someone has said to me along the lines of actually growing up, things that I might say or share about myself would be used against me.
Yeah.
So there's something about, I think, judgment, people who have received a lot of judgment for, I don't know, just being themselves and having struggles or experiences and not being perfect. That, of course, is then going to be projected onto the world. If you had parents that felt quite critical, or even amongst your peers as well, you learn to be private as a form of self-protection. Whereas I think for me, it's much more like when I meet someone, I'm like, I want us to see each other. I want to see
Yeah.
you and I want you to see me.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel safe actually. If I see a bit about them and I get a sense of them, and but I also need to be seen as well. So I'm not
Yeah.
the person who's going to go and just ask questions and listen without any self-disclosure.
Right.
Um, yes, it needs to be this two-way thing.
Well, what's an example of a situation where somebody might not disclose because of a fear of something being thrown back at them or used against them later?
Well, this is where I do get a little bit confused because part of me does struggle to find an example of that. Um, I guess it's and a self-disclosure doesn't have to be, oh, I did this thing or this thing happened. A self-disclosure could be, actually, I'm feeling really anxious about this situation with my friends at school. And you get a very dismissive response, or like, for goodness sake, just stand up for yourself. Like that kind of
Mm,
response is going to make you think, oh, they think I'm wrong for
yeah.
feeling the way that I do, and people will tell me that I'm wrong, or they'll think I'm wrong, and that's why
Mm,
I don't really share how I'm feeling about things if I'm feeling
yeah.
vulnerable about something.
Okay. So judgment would be a
Yeah.
way that that could get used right then and there. I wasn't even thinking that. I was thinking about exposing a vulnerability where there's a power dynamic because I've come from a like that's my MO is like power dynamics. Like where am I going to be overruled or oppressed somehow? And so if I share with somebody a vulnerability I have, I run the risk, and I guess in the back of my mind, what if later that person uses my vulnerability as a way to have power over me? Like they know I'm insecure about X, Y, or Z, and if they needed to, they would exploit that and render me powerless about something. And just that awareness that somebody else is holding that and seeing something that I'm not trying to betray is, it feels almost, I can understand the intolerability of it, which is making me question why I would be an oversharer and why I would have been. I was an oversharer, I think. And I use the term to my own definition before. I think over was what I was doing. And I'm trying to think about why would I have done that if it was a power, if there was a power vulnerability. And I think it's because I think it's the connection thing. I think it's that the people that I share with, I trust. And I want to connect more than I'm interested in having a power dynamic with them. And if I make a mistake, then I'll have regret about that. But generally, when I'm sharing, I think there's more good to come of it than vulnerability.
Well, I'm also wondering in your case, obviously knowing a fair bit about your history, could there have been a part of it that is about almost trying to prove your story? Because you've talked before when you felt so bad about yourself. I want everybody else to see how bad I am as well.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, some kind of affirmation, some kind of orienting of self to prove to yourself
Yeah.
that actually the negative about you, using others as a way to confirm that or affirm that.
Oh, about the negative?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. To me, I feel like for a long time, I just dumped. And I dumped because number one, it helped me organize my own thoughts. And number two, I always felt misunderstood. I still feel like I generally feel misunderstood. And that's mine. Like, I don't even know that I am. I just feel like I am. And something about sharing was a way of explaining, like, what you see or what my behaviors appear to be is not the entire story of me. And if I can tell you more about that, it's clarifying. It's like I'm acting in X way, but the reason I'm acting like this is because blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like these are all the things underneath me. These are all the things underneath my iceberg. And if you can see those things underneath the iceberg, you're going to have a different perspective of what you're seeing on top. Maybe some of us function like that, you know what I mean? Where our behaviors don't necessarily line up with what's underneath them, at least not in the traditional ways of viewing something. So, for example, you know, a lot of times I actually felt this with body image. I felt like my body reflects a person who's let themselves go or who doesn't care or who can't get it together, right? For so many years when I was binging and just weight cycling, I felt like I appeared. And by the way, this comes with a fat phobia bias, and I'm very awareness of that now. But at the time, I felt like my body was a reflection of my laziness. Like I was unaware of
Mm-hmm.
myself. And I always wanted to tell everybody, I actually have an eating disorder. I shared that with people, with strangers, because I needed to explain like what you see is not what's happening. I am actually trying really hard. I'm actually very aware of my shortcomings, and as I would have perceived them as being projected through my body. And so I always wanted to wear a t-shirt that was like, I'm struggling with an eating disorder. This isn't my choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that part felt to me like explaining something that stereotypically would have been interpreted by mainstream or on the surface in a different way. And I think I've always battled with that idea of the way that things look on the surface are not indicative of what's going on underneath. And I feel really, I still feel really passionately about that. But this was like the place where that came up the most.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I was the same. I was the same when my binging started. I told everybody. And all this stuff I was reading about eating disorders is about, they thrive in secrecy.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Like,
at
not
the
this one.
actual time, in the moment of doing it, yes, it was secret, but like afterwards, I think part of it was as well when it started, I was so confused that I was telling everybody because I was hoping somebody might have the answer somehow that was going to help figure it out. So I think that might be part of it too. Have you ever shared, can you remember a situation where you might have shared and then afterwards felt like you overshared and regretted
Yeah.
doing that?
Yes. And this will still occur. And this is what I work with now. So when I'm nervous, I will start talking or I'll shut down completely and be really quiet. But if I do start talking, I will notice that I almost get like, I'm like, I don't really have control right now over where to stop. I can't really sense my boundaries. I'm talking out of it's like nervousness. And I think I think it's trying to connect, but it's when you do that without any sense of yourself, when you lose yourself in the pursuit, you can't connect. And then it just comes, and then it's just cringe after that. So I started to notice when I feel, and this has come from nervous system work, when I feel inside of myself like you're not here, you're not with yourself, you're not grounded, you're over here or up here, and it's noisy, you're dysregulated right now. And if I'm dysregulated and I'm sharing, I I can cue myself. The awareness can come in the meta, and I'm like, close the sentence and step back and ask a question. And
Mm-hmm.
so that has become a way that I make sure that I don't make sure, but I try to make sure that it's not turning into a fawn type of response, which is kind of how I feel it now, where I'm trying to bid for connection so much that I'm actually crossing into something that's probably socially awkward, and or that I'm giving more than I actually know that I can trust. Like I do want to share with people I trust, and I don't want to just be like taking up all this room. And and I know that when I'm feeling most grounded, I can sense that. Like I know that where my boundaries are, but when I'm dysregulated, I don't know where they are. And I don't want to betray myself that way. So I feel it now. And I think before I would just keep going and going and going, and I'd get so lost in it. I kind of feel like that at the moment. Like I'm just like blah, 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 blah. Like um so it's just kind of like the practice of like a bit of stepping back.
Sometimes I make this assumption that other people want to share, that actually they're just waiting to be invited to share. I can't help but feel that, even though I, I do actually know rationally that's not the case. And I remember, I think I told you about it at the time, about a year ago, when I was getting a coach and I was chatting to the woman in the queue or the line, and we just started talking. Then we ended up being sat next to each other, and I started asking her questions about her life.
Yeah.
And then when it got onto that she was a widow, and I asked her a couple of questions about her husband, her whole demeanor changed. She did this whole like shutdown, and I saw her whole like physicality change as well. And I just knew I'd pried too much, or something had been poked in her, which had left her so uncomfortable. So I then tried to talk about myself a little bit to try and pull the focus off of her,
Mm.
but she wasn't engaging in that either. I thought, I'm not just going to talk at her. And yeah, I came away from that just feeling a bit crappy about it, really. I mean, I didn't know where the line was, but it's that I assume everybody wants to talk about themselves and they're just waiting to be
Yeah,
invited. Because
I
I can't
know.
imagine why that. And a lot of people are, to be fair,
To be
I have a
fair,
lot of
yes.
great conversations with people because I'll do that.
And
Yeah.
you might, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's room for people to say, like, no, I really don't like that. But there might also be where there's not somebody in practice of that. For example, this woman may have appreciated, but also it's too much for her. So she might not have been able, like a capacity thing, to be able to stay present with that amount of disclosure or vulnerability that she just can't hold in her for her own reasons. But not that she would have, she might be telling this story on a different podcast somewhere, like where she's like, this kind woman was just trying to connect with me. And I couldn't find myself enough to do that. Right. So like I don't this isn't black and white. This isn't a matter of like you are oversharing or you're not, or it's good or it's bad. It's just a case of two people who have different histories, dynamics, beliefs, comfort levels, nervous systems, and where those things connect and where they don't. And you're never going to know going in. So we're going to have hits and misses. You could have had the same conversation with a different person and it would have been lovely and opened doors, like so.
Yeah. 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 And I have had those conversations, but of course, those aren't the ones that play on my mind.
Of course.
Yeah. So, as a receiver then of somebody else sharing, for you, where would you think of a line if someone was talking to you and sharing? Where could you
Yeah.
imagine that line where you might think, oh, this feels like an overshare?
I actually have a friend who is, I think she's called herself an oversharer. I'm very close to this person. So it's not a case of like we're so close that it's like there's not an oversharing. It's more like, and this is the place where I feel it the most as the recipient. It feels like um it's not about sharing. It feels very much like her needing something so badly from me that that's the part that starts to turn me off, where it doesn't feel it just doesn't feel connecting. I don't think that's what it's about. And there's a difference, because I'll talk to other people who are telling me lots and lots of things and it doesn't feel this way. But in certain cases it feels like you're doing something that I don't feel like it's even about this conversation. And when I sense that, I get a little bit like, this is not, I don't like it. And I get irritated, which is
Yeah.
interesting because I can resonate with it. And maybe that's part of why I'm like, oh no, no, you need to know yourself. Like you need to understand how this is coming across. Um, but it's a difference. It's a different way than if somebody's just sharing deeply.
Hmm.
That's not what this feels like though.
Yeah. And when you were talking then, like your hands were doing all the very Italian of you. Your hand, it was this all the time. When you couldn't find the words, it was like, I don't like it.
There's something about the boundary piece where I start to feel like if you're coming in too hard and fast, I don't like the way that that feels. And it's not about not wanting to connect. It's about something of like, do you sense me here? Do you sense that yeah, there's something about not being seen. It's
Yeah.
something there
Yeah.
in where it feels like it's more about her than about me at all.
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah. It's about having a conversation. There's no sort
Mm.
of reciprocity. There's no
Yeah.
back and forth. I shared a, I gave someone a lift, 4 hour round trip in the car. And I mean, she talked at me the whole way about, big things going on in her life, which again are things that I would normally find interesting. At one point, she said, oh, I'd really like your opinion on this. And then talked for 20 minutes. I was like, so what's the question here? And then when I started to give my opinion, she rushed in with more information to try and explain why my opinion she wouldn't agree with. And then that was kind of it. It was like there was a
Mm.
chink where I was being invited in and then I was
Okay.
just pushed straight back out again. And I was exhausted, absolutely
Four
exhausted by the end.
hours. It's
And
a
then on the way
long time.
back, well, on the way back, I said, if you're tired and you want to have a bit of a kip, that's fine. I can listen to a podcast. She says, oh no, I can't sleep in the car. I was like, great.
It's a kip.
You wouldn't
And
say kip.
no, I don't know what that is. I mean, I
Oh,
assume it's a
well,
nap.
yeah. Is it as a nap? You didn't say kip. Oh,
No. Um,
no.
you're right. I think what you're hitting on is there's a felt difference in sharing that's meant to be, I want to share with you and the reason I want to share with you is because I want to connect to you. And I want to connect back so that then you feel that to come back. And there's this flow to it. And there's, I don't know, the word is connecting. The feeling to me is like warmth, and it's tender. It's right here. It's vulnerable, but it's safely so. It feels right here in the middle of my chest versus being used versus being connected with.
Well, as I'm sitting here thinking about my motivations for sharing, I think actually a big piece of it is I struggle to connect in a situation unless I can say what is actually live in my mind at that moment. The minute I have to filter or censor, I'm now going to be a bit disconnected. And of course, there are situations when you're going to do that, professional situations, all kinds of things like that. And that's okay. So, for
Mm.
example, and I'm sure at some point I'll talk about it on the podcast, but at the moment, my dad's quite ill. Not ready to talk about that. It's not appropriate at this time. But I went to a women's business networking event, which sounds very formal, but it's just this amazing bunch of women. And I really, really like them. But some of them are quite new that maybe I don't know. And there's probably about 11 of us sitting around the table. And we go around and we do a bit of a check in where we say a bit about what's going on in ourselves and we say a bit about our businesses. I had to say something about what was going on with my dad because to not will put me into it takes me out of myself and puts me in this sort of formal mode, which is then tiring. I
Yeah.
don't know how to explain. It's just tiring. So I'm not doing a 10-minute check-in about it, but I need to say it. I need to
Yeah.
say it because it's there. Then I can say it and then I can go on to
Yeah.
the next bit. And that I think is just part of my process
Yeah.
to be able to just say whatever the live thing is that's been going
Yes.
on in my life. If I'm going to connect with someone, that's what it's going to take. And afterwards, I did have a thought where I was like, is that really like appropriate to share in that
I think
situation?
it would be.
Kind of, there's part of me that doesn't care, but there was just a question. I was like, I wonder if that was appropriate then. And I was on a course this morning. We go around, we have a check in the morning. So I mentioned it then because I also had to say if a phone call came, I'd have to go out. And again, everyone's just checking in and going, yeah, I've had a great week. Everything's good, blah, blah,
Mm.
blah. Fortunately, I was the last one to check in. I was going, wow, mine's a bit heavier. This is what's going on. And anyway, but
But
I was
that's
then able
fair.
to, yeah, well, I don't know that everybody feels like
Yeah,
that. A
you're
lot of
right.
people wouldn't say. So
Yeah.
it's not that I think it's not fair. It's just something I'm understanding in my process that is not some crazy reason. It's not everybody's process.
I know. But I don't know. This is clearly potentially a bias, but I listen to that story and I'm like, oh, no, no, no. That's not the same as what I'm describing. Even though there is I'm just like, but how is it not? Because it, you're using the group as a place to like but it's okay. It's like, it's almost like the difference between asking you to mask or not. And if it's a case of, I can't connect with you if I'm masking something that's live in myself right now. To me, when I'm hearing you tell that, I'm like, oh, yes, yes, please let that be here. Let us help you hold that. How is that different than what I was describing when I'm annoyed with my friend? I don't know that I know.
Well, I think there's a couple of things in a situation like that. One, no one is required to respond to me or support me. I'm not asking anything from anyone there. So they're not going to feel that, I don't think, because that's not what's happening. It's only briefly. It's like a couple of moments. And then I'm moving on to the next thing. This is not like this is my whole check-in and I'm just staying there. You're like,
That's
no.
not it, though. I think it's something about the authenticity of it. That's my gut feeling. When you're telling me this, I feel like what you're doing is you're holding something that's really in front of everything else and you're sharing that. And that's part of who you are right now. And that to me is very welcome. I love that. That is better many times. I mean, unless you're honestly having a great day, but like the truth of that and the authenticity of that is what is so connecting. The other thing I'm describing isn't that necessarily. It's not like, you know what, I'm holding something really heavy right now and I'd like to share it. It's more like I'm so not with myself that I'm just filling the time and space with things that are with things.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, when someone is emotionally connected to what they're saying,
Yeah.
you feel it, you're there for it. So even as a listener, let's say someone's talking to you, it's not a two-way thing, but someone is sharing something and they're emotionally connected to their words and what they're telling you, and they want you to know this thing. Grand. I'm not saying every conversation has to be reciprocal. Let me in, let me speak.
Mm.
It's not like that. But I know what you're saying. It's when someone, it's like they're expending some energy, but they're not really connected to the energy. They're not really noticing
Yeah.
what the energy is either. There's something like that going on.
Yeah, you
Yes.
can feel that. You can feel that. And maybe there's something to do with the history there too. Like you said as you were introducing this topic, actually, I wanted to interrupt you to just like ask you about it because you said at a certain time I may, share about like my dad's not feeling it, but he now is not the place and time. It's like you had this boundary with it that seemed clear to you. And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what's that instinct?" Like,
Yeah.
why? Because there's something you're like, I'm not going to cross over that line because I can feel something inside myself that it's not the time and place, which is exactly what we're talking about here about what
Yeah.
ChatGPT defined as that. And but sometimes when I'm thinking about the people in my life where this is an issue for me, it's a long history of not respecting certain lines, right? Like of where it's consistently crossed and consistently coming from this place that we're talking about that's not emotionally connected and over again the chronic nature of that starts to create a story. I create a story then about it, and then now that is leading every interaction that looks like that. So there's got to be more than meets the eye. It's more than some of its parts, where there's also history or whatever the dynamic relationship is between you and this person or wherever that sharing is occurring. Whereas in this group, they're not looking at you as like, oh, Sarah, every single time, she's dumping on us or something like that. It's about also the interpersonal dynamics that
Mhm.
exist as well.
Here's the line for me. I'm happy for anyone to know the facts. The facts about that my dad is ill, what's actually happening, the whole situation. I don't feel any sense of like that I need to protect that or that that is somehow private information that needs to be held close to me. I think when it comes to talking on a public forum or platform, especially when the part of it is me still working through my emotions. So I think talking about something when you're right in it publicly, that I think is an extremely vulnerable thing to do. I've done it once or twice with certain things with you, but that one, there's so many layers to it. Again, one of it is actually, I don't know how valuable that is for other people,
Yeah.
and I don't know how coherent I can be to sort of bring together what that might be. So it is a thought for the listener. It's also a thought. Um, there's a bit of it, because obviously as a therapist, there's a bit of it for my clients as well,
Mm.
and that's part of the cautiousness. Just with the dad situation, if my client of mine hears this and goes, "Oh gosh, Sarah's been dealing with an ill dad," while I'm having sessions with her, is she okay? Is she emotionally available for me? Is she? Do you see what I mean? It's these kinds of dynamics that that's where it's like when it's more about, for me, it's more protecting the listener. There's probably a little bit of like, do I want to put all like me as I'm working through it? But I already know in me like, that this is going to be stuff I am going to talk about once I sort of pulled it together and I sort of understand it a bit more.
Yes, this is going contrary to some other messaging that is valuable to us, I think. But there's something about what you're saying where you are acknowledging the other, right? Which
Mm.
is a bit more people pleasy. And because you and I don't identify as people pleasers, I think there's a balance in it that feels appropriate versus if you were a people pleaser and you were constantly censoring yourself to protect others, or to consider if it's helpful to them or not to hear, then I might be like, well, share a little more. Like you need to
Mhm.
like stop pleasing everybody else so much. But because that's not your struggle, there's something about your ability to read the other side. You're not just in your own space of like what I need and how I want to use you to the point where you can't see the social cue,
Mm.
right? Where you have an awareness of who you're talking to and how many people might be listening and what the context of this conversation is. You have that awareness, and that part to me is meaningful, is that you're reading more than just your own experience. And again, for the people pleaser, I think that's probably happening too much,
Mhm.
but not in a non people pleasing scenario. Like that's to me the difference between you and where I might get frustrated. Somebody who's
Yes.
never considering
Yes.
how's this going to land for the other.
Yes. And there's a few friends that I am in daily contact with who absolutely talking about my emotions with. And I'm sharing the good and the bad because there's like amazing, beautiful moments too. And maybe there's something about this as well. And sometimes people are stuck in just a whole swirl and vortex of terrible feelings, and that's all that they can think about, and that's all they can feel. But that's not the case for me. So like I'm having
Yeah.
moments of enormous sort of like peace and love as well, and I'm having fear and grief, all of this sort of going on at once. There's a couple of things that I do which I think is about having a thought for the other, and I don't consider it people pleasing at all in the, problematic people pleasing way. Is one, I regularly acknowledge my friends for hearing me out or anything like that. I show them appreciation, and like damn it, I mean it. I stay interested in them as well, because a lot of this
Mm.
is through voice notes. We'll send like 10-minute voice notes to each other. I know exactly what's going on in these friends' lives at the moment too. I haven't allowed this thing to swallow up everyone else's
Okay.
experience. And I think that's another way of
Yeah.
I guess protecting the connection and like
Yeah.
continuing to do that.
Yeah.
And I share the good as well. So I'm not only picking up that voice note when I'm feeling sad or something like that, I'm also doing it when I'm feeling so there. I genuinely feel like I have people on this emotional experience with me, which is a beautiful thing. It's something that I need. And I would, I think I'm socially intelligent enough to be able to read this as being absolutely fine for the people that I am,
Yeah. Well, you're
conversing
good
with.
at balancing, and I think you're good at knowing it, which is not to say, by the way, that we can't have times where we're just sitting in the suck and sharing that with other people and not, not being inquisitive elsewhere. But I think you generally have that skill.
But
Um,
there are times, and I'm struggling, unfortunately, to think of some good examples, which is a shame because we're going to have to like draw this recording to an end. There have definitely many times in my life where I feel like I put my foot in it because I've just assumed it's okay to say something. And everyone is like, I think I can do that sometimes with, oh, this is what I do. Oh, I've done this before a few times when I've overshared someone else's experience
uh,
because they've told me something,
yeah.
assumed that
Mm.
it would be confidential. And for me, because if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't care if they told their partner or it came up in a conversation with their friend. I make the mistake of assuming that the other way around, and I've fallen foul of that. So I think more so than, maybe the listeners might think differently, but more so than me oversharing, I feel like I misread. If I'm going to misread anything, it's that other people's comfort level with sharing is
Yeah,
my
it's not
edge
yours.
to develop.
It only
Um,
takes once to make that mistake, I feel like, though. It starts to feel like gossiping. And
yeah,
that
this is the difference, isn't it? Where, I mean, what is the difference between gossip and just sharing something that's going on in someone else's life? I
intent
don't.
probably and tone. I think sometimes
Yeah,
it's like
I think
fodder
so.
for our own like
Yeah,
dopamine
yeah,
versus our friend is dealing with something and I'm concerned, and this is what, compassion and empathy. Again, a
yeah.
lot of it's in here. The behavior might look the same, but there's something different on the inside. I know we have to wrap up, but I also just can't close without I think there's a lot of overlap between like mother wound kind of stuff and the instinct to overshare. I have a client who was speaking to me yesterday about how she continues to like seek in conversations, and we were putting things together, and just like this she's never felt quite seen by her mother, and that she feels like she's still in a place where she's just looking for witness, looking for validation, looking to be seen and heard in a way that she never received from her mother in that original primary relationship, and has subsequently like spent the next 40 years continuing to try to find that unconditional witness who will always be there without any complaints, and just can take it and hold it for her for her adult life. And that anxious attachment kind of vibe tends to go along with this as well. It's a shame we
I,
couldn't get into it, but
I was going to say that is such a good point because I think absolutely that is quite a common dynamic when you haven't been like that hunger to be seen and understood because you haven't had it. There was a deficit there, and so
yeah.
you feel that deficit. It's like, oh, you can't get it quite filled now.
Yes. Could be its own
Um,
episode. Mother wound.
yeah, or which would be more like a trauma response, right?
Yes. Which I
Yes.
think a lot of the dysregulation is. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay.
listeners, let us know what you think or what your experiences are and what pieces we can cover in a future episode for you.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking around.
Bye.
Bye.